The eternal question, what is the difference between UI and UX, between user interface and user experience? It's quite simple in that UI, or user interface, that's the interface that users use to interact with the underlying software. So it's all the things you see on the screen. And typically, since the introduction of the Macintosh in 1984, user interfaces have mainly been graphical user interfaces, or a GUI. And that means it's things like buttons and menus and text fields where you can type and you can click on things with the mouse, and error messages if something goes wrong. All the text, or some kinds called the copywriting, that's part of the user interface. So what users see and what they do and what they click on, that's the user interface. And so that's what you're actually designing. You're designing those screens, the flow, what's on the screens, the visual design, the layout, all those things. That's the user interface, the things that users see. Now, it doesn't have to be a graphical user interface. We can also have, let's say, maybe a gestural user interface, or the way you move. Uh, that could be an user interface, or it can also be an auditory user interface, maybe a spoken interface where the user speaks, hello, hello, and the computer may answer back also by speech, or maybe by some sound effects. So there are different types of user interfaces, but they're all the types of things that the user interacts with. It's interfacing to the underlying system. Now, the user experience, or UX, is, on the other hand, the experience that that person has, the totality of everything they encounter. And so that's really personal to the each individual user, because different people will interpret that user interface in different ways. So we're not really designing the user experience, even though that's a common phrase, user experience design, but we are really designing the user interface, and the user interface then becomes a very important part of the user experience. But there are other parts too, even things like the name of the product or the marketing messages about the product. They can set expectations, and therefore they again influence how people interpret that interaction. So the user experience is also a lot of a matter of how people interpret things, how easy or difficult it is to use, and so forth. And you may have seen there's been a very popular meme going around on the internet with a ketchup bottle being upside down, or right side up with upside down, and say one is the user interface, one is the user experience. That's actually wrong, because they're both user interface. You can design a bottle that works in different ways, and all those bottle designs are the user interface to get at what's inside the bottle. But it's correct that the user experience of using these different user interfaces can be different. It can be much easier to get things out of the bottle if it has been stored upside down, and therefore the contents is already kind of down by the opening. So the user experience of using that user interface can be better. But user experience is what people experience. It can also include the feelings or emotions, subjective satisfaction. And again, you're not really designing that, you're designing the components that impact that. And so sometimes when we have this discussion, people sort of tend to imply that UX is more important than UI, because it's sort of like a higher level or deeper type of concept. But I don't think that's true. User experience lives through the user interface. The user interface is what makes the UX happen. And therefore, UI design is extremely important, and we wouldn't have any user experience if we didn't have a user interface. But that said, in the future, I believe that most parts of user interface design will be done by artificial intelligence. So AI will be designing all the buttons and the icons and writing all the labels and the error messages, and probably do a much better job of doing those things than any human designers can do. Not right now. Right now, it's more like it will help us. It will give us ideas. It will give us like 20 different icons, and then we pick the best one, or maybe a graphic designer will refine it to make it look better. But that's now. If we think about it in 5 years from now, AI will probably do most of those tasks. In 10 years, they'll probably do all of those tasks. What will the humans do? They will still be doing the higher level issues that more relate to that actual user experience. So designing the workflow, deciding what should be done, what user pain points are we trying to address, how do we put all that together? Those strategic issues, more type of judgment call issues, are still under the human domain, whereas the AI domain will be a lot of the lower level issues. So people who today maybe pride themselves in their visual design skills, they may lament this change, but in reality, we should actually welcome it because it means that UX will become cheaper, which means more good work will be done. Right now, it's much too expensive to have these handcrafted designs, and therefore most design is actually quite bad in the digital realm, and we need it to become much better. And the only way you get things to be better is really by making it cheaper so we can afford to spend more resources on quality. And the quality is of the user experience, what the people feel. And we will achieve that by automating a lot of the lower level details. So that's kind of my brief take on the difference between UI and UX. In the future, UI will be done by AI, but UX will still be done mostly by humans.